Mills staged a robbery to lose my wedding jewelry, the only memory I have of my bio family before being adopted. 6 years later, I see the same jewelry being gifted to her daughter for her wedding. She expected me to keep it as a topic to discuss later on. She did not like it when she realized she became the reason that cops raided her daughter's wedding. If someone had told me back then that my wedding day would end with me grieving the last real connection I had to my biological family, I don't think I would have believed them. But that's exactly what happened. I didn't grow up with much. I lost my birth parents when I was still a little girl. And even though my adoptive family gave me love and safety, there was still part of me that ached for the people I came from. The only physical memory I had left of my birth parents was a set of gold jewelry that had somehow survived through relatives and had been handed down to me when I turned 20. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't trendy. It was old, slightly worn, and held more emotion than value, at least in my eyes. There was a necklace with tiny floral detailing, a pair of bracelets with engraved initials I didn't recognize, and a pair of earrings with little ruby stones. I wore them on days I needed to feel close to the people I'd lost. So when I got married, wearing that jewelry felt like I was bringing my past with me into the future. I'd even taken the time to get it cleaned and lightly restored by a local jeweler I trusted. My husband Daniel knew what that set meant to me. At least I thought he did. His family was a different story. His mother Karen had always been a bit extra. She believed she knew best about everything. She didn't ask for opinions. She made decisions from the wedding venue to the menu to who would sit at which table. She tried to run the show like it was hers. I let most things slide for the sake of peace. But the jewelry, that was off limits. I made it clear that I would be wearing my mother's necklace on my wedding day. Even though Karen kept trying to push a new set she had bought for me, something more elegant, she said, which was code for something that would impress her friends. A week before the wedding, she called and asked if she could hold on to the jewelry just until the big day. She insisted she didn't trust it laying around our apartment and offered to keep it in a safer place, her home, in her personal safe. I hesitated, my gut twisted, but Daniel told me to stop being paranoid. He said his mom was trying to help and that it would be one less thing for us to worry about. Against my better judgment, I gave in. I handed her the velvet box and watched her tuck it into her bag like it was nothing more than a clutch accessory. 2 days later, the day of the wedding, everything went from surreal to devastating. I was already at the venue getting my hair done when Karen walked in, white as a sheet, claiming there had been a break-in at her home. She said someone had broken the back window and made off with jewelry, some cash, and electronics. But the set she swore was safe in her possession, was gone. She kept wringing her hands and apologizing, saying she had meant to get it out of the house earlier. She called the police and filed a report. She cried in front of everyone. She even offered me her own jewelry set for the ceremony. But I didn't want her jewelry. I wanted mine. I wanted my mother's necklace, the only part of her I could carry into my marriage. Daniel looked genuinely upset, but he also didn't seem to understand why I couldn't just move on. He told me that maybe it was a sign to start fresh and that wearing his mom's set wouldn't change what the day meant, but it did. I smiled through photos. I said my vows. I danced and clapped and drank and made all the right moves, but inside, I was hurt. I kept thinking of my jewelry sitting in someone else's hands or, more likely, not gone at all. That night when everyone had left and we were alone in our suite, I asked Daniel if he really believed there was a robbery. He looked uncomfortable but said yes. His mother wouldn't lie about something like that. That was the moment I felt something shift at the beginning of my marriage itself. It wasn't just about the jewelry anymore. It was about trust, about instinct, about the way a piece of me had been snatched away and how easily I was expected to pretend it hadn't happened. Over the next few days, I kept hoping someone would find something. The police came back with nothing. Karen claimed there were no cameras in the part of the house where the window was broken. She kept saying she felt horrible. She even bought me a new set, silver this time, with pearls. I never wore it. What ate at me wasn't just the loss. It was the way she avoided every real question. Why was the set left in an unlocked drawer? Why didn't she move it sooner if she was worried? Why were there no fingerprints or signs of forced entry? And why did she look satisfied? Every time I let the subject go, I started bringing it up less and less. Daniel and I began arguing whenever I did. He'd get defensive, claiming I was trying to cause drama or that I had some weird grudge against his mom. Eventually, I stopped talking about it altogether, but I never forgot. I kept the photos I had taken before giving her the box. I kept the original appraisal papers. I kept my notes and my suspicions because something inside me whispered the truth. That jewelry hadn't been stolen. It had been taken. And one day I was going to find out who really had it. And I really believed it. Update 1. The wedding was supposed to mark a beginning, but in many ways it quietly started the end. I didn't realize it then. Life kept moving and I moved with it, but something shifted in me the day that jewelry went missing. I stopped trusting easily. I didn't talk about it much after the first few months. Daniel hated when I brought it up. He'd sigh like I was dragging a ghost out of the closet and then say something dismissive, that his mother had done everything she could, that the past couldn't be changed, and that maybe the jewelry wasn't as valuable as I thought if it didn't even have insurance. I stopped fighting him. On the outside, I became quieter about it, but inside I built a small room in my heart where that pain lived. I visited it often. I wasn't stupid. I knew what it looked like. His mother had staged something or, at the very least, lied about the details. She never looked me in the eye again after the wedding. Not for long, anyway. We only saw her on major holidays. Every time we did, I watched her. Her hands, her ears, her neck. She never wore anything that resembled my mother's jewelry. If she had stolen it to wear herself, she was being careful not to get caught. For a long time, I tried convincing myself that maybe I had it all wrong. Maybe there really had been a break-in. Maybe I had just misplaced my frustration because I had nowhere else to aim it. But that seed of doubt never fully took root because deep down I knew. Time passed. We moved houses and then moved again. Daniel and I never really argued about the jewelry anymore, but we argued about a lot of other things. Things I'm sure were rooted in my resentment. The way he always took his mom's side, the way he brushed off my concerns, the way he never once considered I might have been right. I stopped confiding in him. I started keeping parts of myself to myself. It made our marriage feel more like a truce than a partnership. Then came Risa's engagement, Daniel's younger sister. Karen went into full production mode. The wedding was going to be massive. She booked a castle-like venue 3 towns over and started planning custom invitations and even tried to loop me into helping with the decor. I refused politely, firmly. I had no interest in playing family helper while pretending we were all fine. Risa and I had never been close. She was the kind of woman who called herself brutally honest as a personality trait. Backhanded compliments were her love language. The only reason I tolerated her was because I'd married into the family. Still, Daniel insisted we show up. So, we did. The day of the engagement, I dressed myself in a sleek dark green satin dress. I kept my hair up, makeup simple. I didn't wear any jewelry except a slim silver band on my finger. I hadn't worn anything since the day mine was stolen. When we arrived at the venue, I stayed quiet, scanning the place out of habit. And then during the party, I spotted her. Risa wearing a necklace that stopped me dead in my tracks. I could have sworn my vision blurred for a second, but when it came back into focus, I knew. I knew it was my mother's necklace. I recognized the floral detailing, the exact curvature of the chain, even the slightly faded ruby stone that had always tilted a little to the left. It had been cleaned and polished, maybe even lightly restored, but it was mine. I stood there frozen, watching her laugh and twirl on the dance floor, showing off the piece like it was some new luxury gift. Daniel noticed me staring and asked if I was okay. I didn't answer. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I walked away from him, pretending I needed air, and went to the back terrace where I could be alone. I needed to think. I needed to not scream. After a few minutes, I returned and started watching again, closely this time. The earrings, the bracelets. She wasn't wearing the full set. But just that one necklace was enough to tell me that Karen had never lost anything. She had lied to me, manipulated me, and now she was parading the evidence right in front of my face like I'd forget. I waited. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I left with Daniel without saying much, just claiming I had a headache. The next morning, I started pulling things from my drawer. The old appraisal, the photos I'd taken before handing over the box, even a tiny video clip where I had been showing my best friend the jewelry set before the wedding. I backed everything up. I wrote everything down and then I sat with it because now I had proof. I called in a few favors and within days I had a meeting with a lawyer. I told him everything. I asked what it would take to press charges. Whether a staged robbery like that, even from 6 years ago, could still be investigated, whether anything could be done if I had enough evidence to prove it wasn't a break-in, but theft. The answer was yes, if I was serious about it, and I was. What Karen hadn't realized was that time might have passed, but my memory hadn't. And now the one thing she had counted on, my silence, was the one thing she was going to regret. Update 2. The days after Risa's engagement party felt like a slow burn of restrained rage. I didn't mention the necklace to Daniel. I barely spoke to him at all. And truthfully, I didn't see the point. I had tried to reason with him years ago when the jewelry first disappeared. I begged him to see things from my perspective. He told me to stop being paranoid and let it go. Now, he didn't deserve to be in the loop. That necklace had haunted me for years. The weight of it, the feel of the clasp, the way it had shimmered in sunlight. All of it came flooding back the moment I saw it hanging from Risa's neck like it was just another costume piece in her collection. But this wasn't going to be some emotional confrontation. Not this time. I'd cried too much. I'd lost too much. This time I was going to be cold, calculated, and thorough. I spent the week after the engagement gathering every shred of proof I had. The old photos of me wearing the full set on my 21st birthday. A short video from years ago where I had filmed myself showing the set to my best friend before the wedding. The original appraisal documents which I tucked away with my important papers like some desperate hope chest. And then I pulled up footage from my wedding week, specifically the day I handed over the jewelry to Karen for safekeeping. There wasn't anything explosive in that clip, just a brief exchange on my phone. Me holding the box, her insisting she'd lock it in her personal safe. But her expression had been oddly dismissive, like she didn't care about the sentimental value. At the time, I thought she was just being cold. Now I saw it for what it was, entitlement. I also visited a private investigator a friend recommended. I asked if they could quietly find out where the rest of the set might be. He delivered in less than a week. A cousin of Risa's posted a story on social media showing off the matching earrings. The same cousin, unaware of the history, even tagged the photo with a gushing caption, "Can't believe Aunt Karen saved this whole set all these years for Risa's wedding." That was all I needed. I turned everything over to the police with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. I told them I wasn't just making accusations. I had proof that it wasn't a matter of suspicion anymore, but theft. They told me they'd proceed cautiously, but assured me that if the set was still in Karen's or Risa's possession, they could get a warrant. They said if the jewelry appeared at the wedding, especially in photos or on display, that might be enough for them to take action that day. So, I waited. The morning of Risa's wedding arrived with forced smiles and fake small talk. I wore the same silver band and a simple blue dress. Karen gave me a tight smile when she saw me. The kind people give when they think they've won. Risa didn't say much to me. Just flashed her necklace again like it was any other day. The ceremony started at noon. By then, my heart was pounding so hard I felt like I could hear it over the organ music. And then just as the reception was beginning, it happened. Police officers entered the venue. Not loud, not chaotic, just firm and swift. They walked straight to the bride's table where Risa and Karen were seated. There was a murmur that spread like wildfire. Guests turned their heads. Someone gasped. Someone else started filming. Risa stood frozen with her hand on her necklace. Karen's face turned from confused to horrified in seconds. An officer calmly asked Risa to remove the necklace. Another began speaking with Karen, asking if she had any other matching pieces on her or nearby. That's when the screaming began. Karen demanded they leave her daughter alone. She called it a family heirloom. She said this was harassment. But the officers had the paperwork, my photos, the original appraisal, my video evidence, the social media posts, the statements I'd given about the staged robbery years ago. The lead officer turned to Karen and told her that under suspicion of theft and possession of stolen property, she'd be required to surrender any pieces matching the description. A few officers then headed toward the bridal suite to locate the rest of the jewelry. Daniel looked at me like I just ripped the floor out from under him. He pulled me aside and demanded to know what I'd done. I told him the truth, that the jewelry Risa had flaunted at her engagement party was mine. That the robbery was never real, that I had known for years, but waited for the right time to strike. He stood there stunned, not because he didn't believe me, but because he did. Risa, meanwhile, was sobbing, not because she cared about the jewelry, but because her wedding had become a crime scene. Karen was being questioned in another room. Guests were either leaving or standing around whispering in disbelief. The fairy tale wedding she'd planned for her daughter had turned into a nightmare. And I didn't feel the slightest bit bad. Later that night, after the police had taken everything and most guests had cleared out, I stood alone in the parking lot watching the venue from a distance. Daniel came to find me again, and this time he was quiet. He asked why I didn't come to him first. Why didn't I just try to talk things through? I told him I had years ago. That when I cried to him after the wedding, when I said I didn't believe his mother, when I said the story didn't make sense, he was the one who told me to get over it. Now I had, in my own way. He looked away, maybe ashamed, maybe just finally understanding who his mother really was. Update 3. The fallout from the wedding raid was swift and brutal. By the time Monday rolled around, the story had already spread. A couple of guests from the wedding had sent videos and posted them. And the headline that made it online that night reads something like, "Mother of the bride accused of theft at wedding reception." The jewelry had been seized on the spot, and Karen was told to come in for further questioning the next day. She tried to play innocent at first, saying she had no idea the set was stolen and that someone must have gifted it to her years ago. But the officers had already matched the set to my original appraisal records and the photos. Every lie she tried to spin collapsed under the weight of evidence. She also didn't anticipate how quickly her little secret would unravel once the police started asking about the original robbery. There were inconsistencies all over the story. No sign of forced entry, no details filed back then, despite the supposed break-in. And the strangest part, her refusal to allow anyone else in the family to look through the jewelry safe at the time. Turns out the officer handling the case knew how to pressure someone like Karen. After just one formal interview, she folded. She confessed that she had never reported the robbery because there was no robbery. She claimed she panicked and didn't want to cause a scene before the wedding, so she pretended the set was gone. What she didn't admit was the truth I already knew, that she had intended to keep it all along, that the sentimental value meant nothing to her, that the idea of my parents passing something so precious to me, her new daughter-in-law, someone who wasn't blood, had grated at her until she found a way to make it disappear. Now, she was facing criminal charges for theft, obstruction, and filing a false statement. The police informed me that the case might take a few months to go to trial, but in the meantime, the jewelry was returned to me. I remember sitting in my car outside the station after they handed over the box, just staring at it. It wasn't even about the diamonds or the gold. It was about what they represented. My biological family, my roots, something nobody could replace. And now it was back where it belonged. Daniel didn't come home that night. I didn't ask where he went. Over the next few days, word spread like wildfire among their extended family. Karen was mostly in hiding, trying to dodge questions from relatives. Her image as the respectable matriarch was in tatters. Some cousins reached out to me quietly, saying they believed me now and wished they'd spoken up when I first mentioned the stolen jewelry years ago. I didn't bother responding. Risa, on the other hand, tried to go into damage control. She posted a long, overly edited statement on Instagram, trying to spin it as a misunderstanding. She claimed her mother had confused the origins of the jewelry and never intended harm. She also tried to subtly imply that I'd blown things out of proportion and should have handled it privately, but the comments weren't buying it. People dragged her for flaunting stolen jewelry, for acting entitled, and for calling herself the victim after the wedding was ruined. Within 2 weeks, she'd locked her account and gone radio silent. I heard through a co-worker of Daniel's that the honeymoon had been cancelled and that she and her new husband were fighting constantly about the public humiliation. As for Daniel, he finally asked to talk. He came home after a week away and sat across from me like a man trying to walk back 6 years of denial. He told me he was sorry for not believing me, for choosing to trust his mother over me, and for letting things spiral so far out of control. I told him it was too late for sorry. I told him that if he'd just supported me from the start, if he hadn't brushed off my gut feeling, none of this would have happened the way it did. He said he wanted to try again, that we could go to therapy, that he didn't want our marriage to end over something his mother did. But I reminded him that it wasn't just her. It was his silence, his complicity, his comfort with allowing me to live for years under a lie that he knew deep down didn't add up. So I asked him to leave, this time for good. A week later, I met with a lawyer and filed for divorce. It wasn't messy. There wasn't much to fight over. I had receipts for everything, including the jewelry, and I made it clear I didn't want anything else from his side of the family, just peace. My lawyer told me the theft case was strong. Karen might not serve time given her age and no prior record, but she definitely faced hefty fines and a criminal record. That was enough for me. Jail wasn't the goal. Accountability was. Months passed. I moved out of our house and into a smaller apartment that actually felt like home. It was warm and mine. One night, I placed the necklace back in its box and tucked it into the top shelf of my closet. Not out of fear, but closure. It wasn't a symbol of loss anymore. It was survival. I started over. New job, new friends. I even took a few classes in jewelry design. Not because I wanted to replicate what I'd lost, but because I wanted to understand it. I wanted to know the value of things in a way I'd never trusted others to explain to me again. And Karen, well, word had it that Risa wasn't speaking to her anymore. Apparently, after the embarrassment, her new in-laws weren't too fond of her either. She kept a low profile, trying to avoid public outings or family events. One relative told me Karen had been complaining that she lost everything because of one stupid necklace. But the truth is, she didn't lose everything because of a necklace. She lost everything because she thought I wouldn't fight back. Update 4. 6 months had passed since I officially filed for divorce. I thought there'd be more drama from Daniel, from his side of the family, from whoever still had the nerve to pretend I was overreacting. But surprisingly, things got quiet. Uncomfortably quiet at first. Daniel moved in with a friend from work. At least that's what I was told. The house we used to live in stayed empty. We kept communication limited to legal and logistical stuff. And even that felt odd, like we were both dancing around everything we never said during the actual marriage. I didn't owe him closure. He chose his mother's lies over my truth. He lived comfortably with her fake robbery for 6 years while I buried the memory of my bio parents in silence. But he didn't stay quiet for long. The first flower delivery arrived just after the divorce papers were finalized. A pale pink bouquet, roses, lilies, and baby's breath. The note read, "You didn't deserve what happened. I'm so sorry." No name, but I knew it was him. The handwriting was his. I stared at the arrangement for maybe a minute before dumping it in the trash. Not because I wasn't tempted by the apology. I was, but because I knew what it meant. He still didn't get it. Flowers were easy. Comforting words were easy. Owning up to 6 years of emotional neglect and willful blindness? Not so much. The second bouquet came a week later. Red roses this time. The card said he'd been thinking about the good years and how maybe if we took it slow, we could find a way back to each other. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because by then I was already moving on. Not with someone new, not romantically, not yet. But I was finally waking up to how much of myself I'd let shrink over the years just to keep the peace. I'd spent so long walking on eggshells in that family that I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without guilt. Therapy helped a lot. So did getting back into things I used to love. Sketching, walking through antique markets, baking in the evenings with my music turned up loud. I even hosted a small dinner for some co-workers who'd supported me through the worst of it. Real people who didn't tiptoe around hard truths or try to gaslight me with fake sympathy. I told them the whole story one night over wine. The robbery, the wedding, the cops. One of them said something that stuck with me. "You didn't just get your necklace back, you got your power back, your ancestry." They were right. It wasn't just about reclaiming what had been stolen. It was about everything I refused to let them take from me moving forward. Daniel didn't stop with the flowers. Eventually, the deliveries turned into handwritten letters. He didn't mail them. He dropped them off at my building's front desk like some dramatic Nicholas Sparks character. Each letter was filled with memories, confessions, and regret. He wrote about how he let his mother control everything from birthday dinners to our marriage decisions. He said he missed my laugh. He said he missed the way I used to hum while cleaning, or how I always left sticky notes with reminders on the fridge. He said he still loved me, but every line felt like it was written for him, not for me. There was never a moment where he said, "I should have fought for you." It was always, "I wish things were different," as if the betrayal happened in a vacuum. It didn't. He watched me cry over that jewelry. And when I thought it was gone forever, he told me I was being paranoid. He stood next to his mother while she smiled at me with that smug little face and said, "Some things just weren't meant to be kept." No amount of handwritten letters could erase that. I didn't block him. I didn't respond either. Silence became my answer, and eventually even he got tired of shouting into a void. Last I heard, he moved across the state for a new job. A mutual acquaintance told me his relationship with his mom had become strained. Apparently, the criminal charges really hurt her standing in her social circle. She lost her volunteer board positions and had to pay restitution on top of everything else. Risa still wasn't speaking to her. Poetic in a way. A family that once stood so high and mighty had finally seen what it felt like to be knocked down by their own choices. As for me, I'm doing well. Better than well, actually. Sometimes I still wear the necklace, not to flaunt it, but to remember, to honor the parents I lost and the strength I gained by refusing to let anyone else take advantage of their memory again. I even joined a local community group focused on helping young women recognize gaslighting and emotional manipulation in relationships. I shared my story once during a workshop. No names, no jewelry, just the essence of it. And someone came up to me afterward and said, "Thank you." That gave me the courage to finally leave. I think that was the real full circle moment. Not the raid, not the divorce, not even the justice, but knowing that by standing up for myself, I helped someone else believe they could too. That's what Karen never understood. She thought I was weak. She thought I was some sentimental orphan who would bow her head and swallow whatever scraps she offered just to keep the illusion of family. But I didn't need their approval. I never did. I just needed to remember who I was before they tried to shrink me down. And now I'm everything they never saw coming.